talking Illinois high school football.
If your goals are as high as you talk about, tonight's the night you go out and just take one more step.
It's a view from the West.
And it starts right now!
Welcome to View from the West podcast, brought to you by Breedlove Sporting Goods, part of the River Rivals Media Network, the podcast covering Illinois high school football on the western side of the state. I'm your host, Greg Armstrong, joined once again, as always, by Mitch Stormer. Maybe not as always. You were out last week, Mitch, but hey, you're back in the fold here. Ty did pretty well stepping in. He kind of knows the Three Rivers a little bit.
Yeah, as always, it's pretty generous lately, but yeah, having Ty step in, certainly he's the subject matter expert on all things on the track side of the house. So yeah, he can fill my seat at any episode that he wants. He's always welcome on the show.
Hey, and did you catch, we got to give a shout out to the Viola Tropics, the now 3-time slow pitch softball champions of the world out near Aledo. So how about that?
Yeah, I heard him talking about that, and then I saw his post about it. So yeah, shout out to the Tropics, doing big things in the softball scene right now.
Absolutely. He will love the shout out. He knows, he wants the coverage of the Tropics, and maybe that's our next episode of View from the West spinoff, slow pitch softball, scene, and we'll get the Tropics in there.
Maybe we preview that league next year.
That's right. That's right. All right, there we go. Well, hey, we're not previewing the slow pitch softball. We're previewing another high school football conference, and it's a first here on View from the West podcast. We're previewing the Big Northern Conference. Mitch, this is a conference we've kind of covered from afar. We've seen it, especially come playoff time, some non-conference games. I got to be honest, I am really excited about this because it's a conference we've looked at and thought, man, that's some really good football being played up there. We get to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a natural progression for the show and a natural inclusion into our coverage, just because, like you said, we've seen a lot of these teams, mostly all of them really going through the list. We've seen them at one time or another in the last 6 seasons, whether it be in a regular season crossover or a playoff game. So, and certainly with Dupex's move to the Big Northern next season, what better time than now to jump in and start covering this conference?
Yeah, so the Big Northern Conference season preview is here. I'm ready. I'm excited to introduce for this season our Big Northern Conference Insider, Tanner Wilhelm. Tanner, welcome to View from the West podcast. Thanks so much for lending your knowledge, for doing the research and jumping in to talk a little, Big Northern football here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm real excited about this. Love high school football. It's awesome. It's one of the purest forms of football. I'm from the area where a lot of these teams are placed. So my proximity to the Big Northern Conference is relatively close. So I'm excited. I appreciate you guys having me on and for this opportunity. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, so you are a fellow Three Rivers, or Big Rivers maybe at the time, alum here. You're a graduate of Amboy. Now, Mitch is a Morrison Mustang, so I don't think your high school paths crossed, but you were certainly in the same conferences playing on the same fields week in and week out.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. I went to Amboy when they were still playing 11-man. I graduated in 2012, so part of some teams there. But yeah, the Big Rivers Conference, Morrison, Newman, Riverdale, St. Bede, Amboy, Fulton, when it was all those teams. Now it's kind of split up. Everyone's kind of went their separate ways. Obviously, Amboy's gotten smaller, went to 8-man, and had great success there. So it's kind of nice seeing that happen for them. When I graduated, I think we had about 18 kids on our team. So 8-man would have probably been pretty welcome for us at that point, but still proud to be from Amboy, proud to grow up there. Obviously Amboy, again, not far from, I live in Dixon now, but not far from a lot of these teams, Dixon, Rock Falls, Oregon, that area, teams that are in the Big Northern Conference.
Yeah, I love it. That's why we brought you in here. So there's a good chance I probably shot some high school football when you were on the field. I covered when Amboy would cross over, like you said, and come this way towards the Quad Cities. There's a good chance I was probably at a game that you were at. So you went to Amboy, played football for Amboy for the Clippers, then you played at Monmouth College, and through a little bit of digging, a little research here, you were teammates with friend of the podcast, now Roval Williams Field head coach Grant Goldstrand.
Yeah. Grant was, he was a year older than me, an offensive lineman at Monmouth. So, yep, I know Grant real well. Yeah, yep, he coaches at Rova now, so great for him. But yep, yeah, a lot of connections to Monmouth around the conferences that you guys cover. Obviously, the Big Northern Conference, the Big Rivers as well. I mean, I had teammates that we talk about. We played each other in high school football all the time, so it's kind of cool. And Monmouth, for a Division III program, a lot of success there as well.
I saw a lot of names on that roster that I know I covered playing high school football that then you played with in college. There's a lot of names on there that was really cool to go back. And also, you're going to get in trouble by Coach Goldstrand if you only call it Rova. It's Rova Williamsfield. He's going to call you out on that now.
I'll look out for that.
So,
Not 5 minutes into his first episode, we got a mea culpa that we have to issue there for the Cougars there in
yeah,
Williams.
that sounds like him,
Yeah.
So.
Well, Tanner, thanks so much for being here. Tell me a little bit about what do you like? What do you appreciate about the Big Northern? Being that you live out that way, you obviously, you've played high school, you played football at multiple levels. What do you like about what you see in the Big Northern Conference year in and year out here?
One thing, it's just kind of the epitome of a small town high school football. The communities are passionate about it. Friday night, the places are shut down. Everyone's at the football game. It's incredible. It's huge in this area, high school football. So I just love that. Another thing that I love about this conference is just how competitive it is. There's a lot of parity in it. You have, a lot of history of successful teams, a lot of state championships, a lot of teams that have qualified for the playoffs numerous years, numerous times in a row, things like that. And just some great teams, some great history, some great tradition, all of those things, the things that kind of define high school football to me. This conference kind of captures all of that.
Yeah. The Big Northern, Mitch, reminds me a lot of the Northwest Upstate Illini, where, you look through decade over decade and there's a team that is on a dominant run, right? There's always teams that are making that run. I look back at the records that we compiled into our notes and you think man, that team was on a run in this time frame. Then it was this team. Then it was, now it's Byron. It's there's just a lot of accomplishments over the years. It's fun to look at.
Yeah, going through the notes and you see, two teams that have been or that were included on the IHSA's top 50 programs of all time. I mean, that's nothing to sleep on. So, but yeah, and you've seen, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, you've seen teams like Dixon starting to rise up more over the years, and certainly Byron historically, obviously, but their success in the last couple of years reminds you a lot of Lena Winslow. So I agree with you. I think there is a lot of similarities here, and certainly, like we just talked about with Dupec moving to this conference, there's, your 1 degree of separation there too. So, yeah, excited to talk about these teams because I think if listeners aren't familiar with the history here, they're going to learn that there's a lot of great football that has always been played in this conference.
Yep. All right. Well, before we jump into all things Big Northern football, we're excited to announce a new sponsor. The official sponsor of our coverage for Big Northern football this season is brought to you by Byron Wealth Management. Stop by and see Sean Considine, an LPL financial planner, today to talk the markets, maybe talk a little bit of football. I know he's always in for that too. So either way, thank you to Byron Wealth Management. And Mitch, speaking of sponsors, you know who we got to thank before we get rolling here.
Yep, I sure do. Tonight's episode is brought to you by our friends at Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They provide all the same sporting goods services as the big nationwide companies, but with a faster turnaround, and their uniform pricing is a fraction of the cost you're probably used to. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and they are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. Check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com for more information.
Always appreciate what Breedloves does for us. And speaking of that, View from the West merch, our merch store is on the way, coming very soon. As you listen to this, it may already be available, depending on what day you're listening. We're really excited for that. We have more View from the West shirts, hoodies, hats, plus we have our rivalry shirts available again this year, and new this season, we have some individual team merch that we're excited to sell. think like Tecmo Bowl, retro Tecmo Bowl style shirts. We got those ready to roll out. I've seen some mock-ups for them. I'm really excited for that. So like I said, the View from the West merch store coming soon, if not already available when you listen to this. Keep following along on X, on Instagram, on our YouTube channel. We'll have the announcements up there when they're up and ready to roll, when you can pick up your View from the West merch. So, all right, today is our big Northern Conference preview. We've already previewed the Northwest Upstate Illini and 8-man football. We've previewed the Lincoln Land Conference and the Three Rivers Athletic Conference. All those are available in the archives. Go check them out now if you haven't already heard them. You can find them on our podcast feed or on our YouTube channel. You can find the video there. This is the Big Northern, of course. Next week, August 19th, we'll roll out the Western Big Six preview. Our conference insider for that week, head coach Denny Derricks, the former Geneseo head coach, over 50 years coaching experience, now an announcer for the Maple Leafs. He will bring his expertise and his insights in for the Western Big Six. Really excited about that one. And of course, we can't forget to promote the big show. Join us for the inaugural View from the West kickoff party on Sunday, August 17th at 5 p.m. at the Other Bar in downtown Moline. Coaches, student athletes, parents, fans, all are invited to join us for a live podcast event to celebrate the 2025 season. Like I said, all are welcome. Students must be accompanied by a parent or an adult. We will have coaches there, area experts there, live to preview the upcoming season. We just heard that since Ty Taylor already won the softball championship, he's confirmed he's going to be there. So we're excited for that. Kyle Kampmeyer already confirmed as well. He's in, and a handful of head coaches from across the area, from every conference we cover, are going to be there. So really excited. We're going to be working with Breedloves for giveaways, for raffles. The merch will be available that night. It's going to be a lot of fun. Save the date, Sunday, August 17th, 5 p.m., the Other Bar in downtown Moline. Of course, we want to say thank you to everyone who follows along. You can make sure you follow, subscribe on X, on Instagram, subscribe and follow on YouTube as well. Full-length videos, individual team previews, game highlights, and more. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Help us spread the word about the podcast. If you're interested in being a sponsor, reach out. You can let us know. Email us at viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. We also have some ad space for your advertisement for this show. Support local high school football, and we want to support your business. If you don't have a business, but you still want to support what we're doing here, you can head directly to PayPal, search us up, View from the West Podcast, or find us paypal.me/viewfromwestpod. All right, Mitch, I'm running out of breath. All the details are out of the way. Let's talk some Big Northern football.
Can we circle back for 1 second?
Absolutely.
And just speaking to our newest sponsor here for the coverage for Byron Wealth Management, and certainly Sean Considine, a former Iowa Hawkeye. How about the news this week from our buddy Matt Randazzo? Him and Pat Anger are going to be doing the pregame show for the Hawkeyes now.
Absolutely. Really cool. So Dazza will be the voice of the Hawkeye Tailgate pregame show, which will go out around the state of Iowa. Part, of course, Matt Randazzo and his show Off the Air, part of our River Rivals media network. So we're really excited for him. Did you see he was up at Media Day in Iowa City for a live show, interviewed Kirk Ferentz live? Really cool. Really great interview. Just a really cool setup. So yeah, really happy for him and all the exciting things coming for him down the way here this season.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun if you're into things such as Iowa Hawkeye football.
I was gonna say our listeners may be a little mixed on that, but it's a really exciting opportunity either way. You think Dazzle can hook us up? We gonna go to Iowa City someday, Mitch?
I mean, he's got the inside track now. If he doesn't, it would just be inconsiderate, I think.
That's very true. Tanner, where do your college football allegiances lie before we get going into high school here?
Actually Iowa. So it's funny that
there you
that
go.
you bring that up. So there's some family connection with Sean Considine and I.
Yeah.
And he obviously went to Iowa. I think around that time I was probably like junior high age.
Yeah.
Growing up, my dad was always an Illinois football fan. So I kind of rooted for them, but that was kind of the dog days of Illinois football. They weren't very good. So then when he kind of went to Iowa, it gave me a reason to pivot and start rooting for someone else who had a little more success. So I've been an Iowa fan kind of since then.
There you go. I always say, like, I'm not an Iowa fan, but man, like, Kirk Ferentz makes it really hard to root against Iowa because I just when I listen to him talk, I just like the way he leads a program. I just have a ton of respect for him. So anyway, Mitch, what do you got?
I was just going to say, let's not forget that Illinois coach Brett Bielema, big fan of the show.
That's true. He also gives a shout out on the podcast. So we got to give love to Illinois as well. Because, yeah, he is actually, you hear him on the pod. So anyway. All right. Well, let's get into big Northern Conference football here. We're going to start with Dixon. Head coach Jared Shaner entering his 5th season with the Dukes. Last year, a record of 10-2. They won a first-round playoff game against Marengo. They won a second-round playoff game against Chicago Ag Science Big, 51-6, before falling in the quarterfinals to Coal City, 20-13. The Dukes have now qualified for the playoffs 10 straight years. And to put that in some context, they had only made the playoffs once in the previous 12 seasons before that. So until this run, they had never made the playoffs more than twice in a row. So, I mean, Mitch, you remember growing up not too far from Dixon, like they were not a powerhouse football program. They had year in and, every once in a while, but this is certainly an unprecedented run for them.
Yeah, certainly under Coach Jared Shaner getting into his 5th season here in 2025. So his previous 4, kind of what you just said, he's been to the playoffs every single season that he's been there. And this is that team that, if we make the connections to the Northwest Upside Illini, this is my Stockton, right? This is a team that has been around for a while, has really started making progress, and now they have a legit shot at the champ. So, yeah, with this group this year, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get some answers week 2, I think, in a big game with Dixon and Byron. But this Dixon squad looks reloaded and ready to repeat last year.
So Byron and Dixon play in week 2, correct?
I believe that's right.
Yep, that's correct.
Yep. And also, as you just referenced Stockton, don't Lena Winslow and Stockton also play in week 2?
Yeah, it's week 2 or week 3. So, yeah, that'll be a big week of football.
Oh, man. All right. Well, Dixon returns 4 on offense. They return 6 on defense. Although, Mitch, you must point it out here, the Friday Night Drive article says they return 8 starters on defense. So somewhere in that mix of 6 to 8, we'll just say. So give us some players to watch. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. Give us some players to watch.
Yeah, well, if you knew nothing about the Dixon Dukes and you saw maybe just a couple plays, you could probably point out Landon Carnegie pretty quick. A running back, 134 carries last year for just over 1,200 yards and 18 touchdowns. He was a first-team All Big Northern Conference last year. In that Friday Night Drive article, it mentioned that he's rehabbing a knee injury, but sounds like he'll be good to go. Last year in the opener, he rushed for 335 yards and 4 touchdowns against Rockford Lutheran, and that's who they get again this year. So that offense is going to click with Carnegie back in the backfield. Again, sounds like he's good to go. We got a new quarterback. Jagger Kemp takes over as QB1. He's got a handful of returning linemen in front of him to help protect and get that ground game going. So on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of returning players, even with a new quarterback. And defensively, you got Jake Whelan, a linebacker, 40 solo tackles last year, 73 assisted tackles. He's all over the field, 6 tackles for loss, added an interception and a forced fumble. So this Dixon group, only naming a couple players, but whether it's 6 or whether it's 8 on the defensive side, it's a really talented group. A lot of experience coming back for this Dixon team.
Yeah, I'm interested that Coach pointed out that one of the team's strengths he thinks this season is their defensive front. He think will be a strong point for them. And Tanner, you've seen it. I think in the Big Northern Conference, if you're going to win football games, you got to be strong on the line. You got to have good line play, period.
Yeah, yep. It all starts in the trenches, especially in this conference. So yeah, definitely have to be strong up there. It'll be interesting too to see what Dixon does this year. Carnegie returns, who had an unbelievable year last year. They do lose their quarterback from last year, so it's a new quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see because they aired it out a decent amount last year. I want to say that Shaner, who was a quarterback last year, he threw for like over 1,800 yards, which is a very high number, especially in this conference where teams are kind of known for ground and pounding the ball. So it'll be interesting to see kind of their approach this year, if they're gonna go a little more ground heavy, or mix it up, or kind of still go back to the air. So I'm excited to see what they do this year.
So we already referenced it. In week 2, it'll be Dixon versus Byron. They played an epic game a year ago, ended up 1-2 in the conference standings at the end of the season. They played an epic last year.
Yeah, that game, I was at that game. It was one of the best games to go to, I think, last year. And it was a great game. Yeah, it came down 29-28, I think was the final. Byron won on a 2-point conversion there at the end, barely got in. And it was an unbelievable game. And I'll be honest with you, we had to wait a lot longer for that game last year than we're going to have to this year. But the prior couple years, Byron and Dixon were kind of the top teams in the conference, and a lot of people were excited for those games. And then the time came and Byron was just kind of on a different level. And Dixon couldn't compete. And kind of going into that game, I think a lot of people expected that to happen. Kind of like, well, Dixon's had a great run, but Byron's just so good. They've been a powerhouse. They're going to come into Dixon and they're going to run away with it. And actually, the opposite happened. And Dixon played a great game. It was real competitive. Just an awesome game, an awesome high school atmosphere for sure.
Yeah. It is interesting that you said last year, I think it was later in the season, right? That game was?
Yeah, it was like week 7 or 8, maybe. It was, at the very, very end of the year.
So obviously both teams, had playoff games in there, so that, they're several games removed from that, but it's still fresh on Dixon's mind. And to have that rematch happen in week 2, right? I mean, right away at the beginning of the season, it is really interesting to see how that affects momentum, or they've talked about it. They've had that one circled, all off season. So that's exciting. It's going to really open up the conference, with a bang here. Before we get ahead of ourselves, Dixon opens up on the road at Rockford Lutheran, a team we'll talk about in a minute here. But we asked coaches who they thought the favorite was, and I think we kind of know where that's going. We'll talk about that other team in a second, but Dixon's right there. I think, like you said, Mitch, they're an exciting team that's been building, and I think even in a loss last year, you take a little confidence away knowing you hung with Byron till the very end.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, we talked about those players coming back in the trenches. Byron is probably one of the best at that. So if they can go toe-to-toe with Byron, they can have that confidence to do it again. And like you guys have talked about, we don't have to wait very long. We don't have to wait till week 8 this year. It's just right there in week 2. So, got to get past Rockford Lutheran first, but looking forward to the Dukes season overall and certainly that week 2 game.
Yep. Shout out to Dixon assistant coach Brad Winterland. He was making sure we got the preseason info form filled out and returned. So we love that. Coach, we really appreciate it. And actually, that's a good time to take a reminder here to any coach listening in the Big Northern Conference or any coach listening across our area. As we get rolling in the season, if you have a spreadsheet that you keep updated throughout the year with stats from game to game and then season totals, we would love to, be able to see that and be able to keep up with that. We'll be recording podcasts every Sunday night. So if we can have that info on hand going into those recordings on Sunday, it just really helps recap your previous week and then obviously look ahead to the next week and what players have been performing and what players have been putting up the numbers. So there's a good kind of reminder to all the coaches in the area. I know we reached out to the Big Northern coaches to give them the heads up like, hey, help us out. We'll help you out and promote your program.
This is Dan Pearson of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Our FCA team of staff, board, and volunteers is pleased to support View from the West with Greg and Mitch. Our Northwest Illinois FCA team is 3 teams in 1, serving coaches and athletes in the 3 Rivers, Northern Illinois, and Greater Peoria areas, all with schools covered by View from the West. For more information, email me at danpearson@fca.org. FCA, the heart and soul in sports.
Hey there, local high school football fans. This is Sean Considine, a Byron Tiger and Iowa Hawkeye alumni and now an LPL financial advisor. I'm passionate about high school football because it's the purest form of the game where communities come together. You can find me in my Byron office until I run off to football practice. I'm happy to talk about football or the markets. I'll leave that up to you. I want to wish everyone across Illinois a safe, successful, and memorable high school football season.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC.
Hey, this is Brett Bielma, the head coach of the Fighting Illini from Prophetstown, Illinois. You're listening to the View from the West podcast.
All right, let's jump into Genoa-Kingston, the Cogs, and Cameron Devakos as head coach here. He had a 5-5 record a year ago. They returned 2 on offense and 4 on defense. Genoa-Kingston is one of several teams that we'll talk about in this conference that they were all kind of log jammed right in the middle there between like a 4-5 and a 5-4 regular season. They all kind of battled each other out throughout the year. and a lot of teams that have some unknowns when you talk about who's returning and maybe not as many returning starters, only 2 on offense, 4 on defense. But Mitch, give us some of the guys we should be watching out for here for this Genoa-Kingston squad.
Yeah, only 2 back on offense, but certainly some impact players that you need to watch out for. A couple of running backs, Anthony Gum and Owen Zacard. Get a quarterback in Cody Cravata. He's going to be throwing to Benji Kiba. They've got a kind of a hybrid player in Jaden Lee who can take some snaps under center or in the shotgun and also play receiver. Blake Ides is out there for a receiving option as well, and Mason McPeak there on the offensive line. Defensively, Zacard and Cravata are our 2 big linebackers for this Cogs defense. Jaden Lee back in the defensive backfield. Also, Ides and Cash Sunderledge as a defensive back. And then you might as well throw in Mason McPeak right there alongside Aiden Rich on the defensive line.
Tanner, what do you think about this Genoa-Kingston squad? Last year made it to the playoffs at 5-4. You know, you have to battle to get there in the Big Northern Conference. And like I said, they were kind of log jammed there in the middle. They make it in, lose their first round playoff game. What do you see out of them?
Yeah, like you said, kind of a logjam there with teams that are 5-4 and stuff. And this is a team I think that definitely could take a jump, maybe get to 6-3, 7-2. We kind of hit on the Dixon being a top team already. We'll get into Byron a little bit, but I think kind of those 3 through that, the rest of the conference is kind of anyone's game. And Genoa-Kingston, I like Mitch said, they returned quite a few on defense. And last year they had a pretty good defense. Kind of looking at just the scores and stuff, they had I think 4 games or so where they gave up 14 points or less. So pretty good there. And then there was a couple that they only gave up like 22. One of their losses, I think, was a 3-0 loss to Oregon there, and then like a 22-20 loss to Stillman Valley. So, they're 5 points away from being 5-4, 5 points away to being a 7-2 team last year. And then they're bringing back a decent amount of guys on defense. So they're kind of a team to, I think, keep an eye out for.
Yeah, interesting. Coach talked about he really likes just the kids they have in their program, that they've worked really hard this offseason. He's excited to see that hard work pay off. And, he says they're looking, honestly, we ask for areas of improvement. They're looking to improve in all phases of the game. Take it one day at a time, make sure that they know they can play sound assignment football. And, just these kids have had a great offseason, and he wants to now kind of take it out on the field and see what they're made of. And I think that's that exciting transition to see some kids get an opportunity and see what they can do. Yeah, Mitch, what do you got?
Oh, and a pretty bitter taste in their mouth from last year, losing, I think it was 66-0 to Dupec in that first round playoff game. Dupec really took it to them, and that's a good Dupec team, certainly. So, they've had months and months and months of that in their heads, getting prepped for this 2025 season.
Yeah, we always ask coaches for some fun team traditions or things we should know, maybe off the field about these programs. One of the traditions they continued this year was going to Wall Camp Team Retreat, where they camp out at a local campground. They have a few days of team bonding. Another tradition is to pay respects to former coach Dave Russell by hosting a fun run triathlon the first Saturday practice in August. So a couple little cool team notes there, kind of team bonding things to bring the team together. Genoa-Kingston opens against Oregon. So again, a team we'll talk about here in a second, but another team kind of sitting there right in the middle of things. That's a huge game right off the bat, Tanner, when you're talking about a team trying to get, off on the right foot with a win. But man, down the road, these kind of games in the middle, you got to win them.
Yeah, 100%, especially kind of like we already hit on this teams that kind of are just jumbled up, in that range that can go anywhere from 4-5 to 7-2, that type of thing. Those games in the middle are going to be huge for playoff implications. Week 3, week 4, it doesn't seem like it, but when there's only 9 games, and 8 of them are in the conference, they're all going to matter.
Yep. All right, let's get to the Oregon Hawks. I almost said Oregon Ducks. That's I'm not that well trained in the Big Northern yet. I'll get there. We got it. The Oregon Hawks, head coach Brock Kundert. Mitch, he's an old fan of the show, a former head coach for Ackwen. So he's now at Oregon. So good to have, talking about him back in the mix here. Last season, again, like Genoa-Kingston, they were 5-5, lost in the first round to a good Princeton team. They returned 5 on offense, 5 on defense. So a good number of returners here for a team that was a playoff team looking to maybe make that next step.
Yeah, and you look at their running attack. They showed that in that Princeton game, but like you said, that Princeton defense, especially last year, was so good. But this Hawks teams bring back 3 running backs: Cooper Johnson, Keaton Salisbury, and Jacoby Donegan. Again, 3 really good running backs that are going to pace this Hawks attack. Up front, Tristan Smith Van Cura on the offensive line. So yeah, 5 on offense, 5 on defense. On defense, you got Jacob Mosier, Jaden Berry, Ethan Reed, Xander Withers, and Aiden Courier there in the defensive backfield. So again, a good handful of experience for a playoff team last season coming back.
Yeah. Coach really likes that this is maybe one of the faster teams that he's had at Oregon. So all skill spots feature kids that can run, as well as both lines being able to move. So a lot of potential there with, athletics, speed on the field. Have a lot of potential, again, has for kids to take plays to the house if they get that open field. So you got to like that kind of dangerous one play, can really change momentum of an entire game. Tanner, what do you see here in Oregon? What do you like about them?
What I like, first of all, is kind of what Mitch already hit on, is just how many guys are returning. I think of kind of all the teams in the Big Northern, they might have the most returning maybe on both sides. I mean, 10, 5 on offense, 5 on defense, so 10 total. That's a lot. And kind of like you're saying, just I think the speed, that's going to be a key to their success with the running game, that as well. Mitch hit on Cooper Johnson, but he was honorable mention all conference last year. Obviously, he's going to step into an even bigger role this year. So it's going to be a lot of skill spots where they have a lot of talent. So it'll be fun to kind of watch them and keep up with them. I know the coach did mention they don't have a ton of depth, so one of their keys is going to be to stay healthy, which I think any key coach would say that's a key to success there. And they're going to return, I think, just one offensive line starter. So getting their guys up to speed there will be important. But it'll be interesting because they'll have the experience in the backfield and then a little less experience up front. And we talked about the importance of the trenches in this conference. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how those two complement each other, the offensive line and then the run game.
Yeah, for sure. So as we just referenced, Oregon will open on the road at Genoa-Kingston. Seems like a really important game for those teams, looking to get back to the playoffs, looking to maybe end up a little better than 5 wins, improve your playoff spot, when you come to week 10. So see what they could do there. That's your look at Oregon. All right, let's talk about North Boone, the Vikings. New head coach this year, Brett Frederick. He's a North Boone alum, so back on the sidelines coaching at his alma mater. Now, this North Boone program has made the playoffs twice recently in 21 and in 23. They have not been able to grab a playoff win. Last year, they were 4-5. Their playoff chances fell short in a Week 7 loss to Rockford Lutheran, 21-0. So, Mitch, give us a couple names here to watch for the Vikings.
Yeah, a couple of players here that'll be on the North Boone sidelines this year, helping them out. Brandon Slater, running back, Eli Bryan, and Colin McKibben, will be pacing this North Boone team here in 2025.
Yeah. When you start looking at 4-5 a year ago, they fell short in that loss in Week 7, like I referenced. But Tanner, it seems like to start the season, like there's an opportunity here for North Boone.
Yeah, they got 3 games that are very, very winnable games. I'll have to check the schedule here. I don't have it up.
So they have Winnebago on the road to open the season. They're at Rock Falls, and then they're at Peru St. Bede. So all teams, when you look at record-wise last year, struggled.
Yeah, definitely a big opportunity for them to get wins against Rock Falls and Winnebago as well. And then, St. Bede, a non-conference matchup that they could come away with a win. So good chance there. They start 3-0, get on the right track. And then you only need a couple more after that to get into the playoffs. So a good opportunity for them to start the season.
Yeah, and we've talked about, how hard this conference is. You kind of have to take advantage of those opportunities early in the season because you got Dixon waiting, Byron, Genoa-Kingston, Oregon. All the the neat teams we've already referenced. So
100%. And there's some other teams we'll get into probably here in a little bit that unfortunately are on the other side of that where they're going to open and it's going to be a gauntlet for them. Or they're going to have some tough stretches.
Yep. All right, well, let's move down the way. Rock Falls also has a new head coach, David Shavira. He leads the Rockets now. They were 0-9 a year ago, but some positive aspects to look at here. They returned 7 on offense, 4 on defense. So there's some experience coming back that, hopefully maybe they've learned through some challenges. This is a Rock Falls program that it's desperate for a spark. It's struggled for a while. Mitch, who are some names here that are looking to turn the corner for the Rockets?
Yeah, they got a handful of returning impact players that'll help try and reset that momentum. Logan Thome is a receiver and running back for the Rockets. Ja'Kai Jones on the offensive line. You've got Alex Espinoza as a running back, and Trail Stonich will be the quarterback for the Rockets this year. On the defensive side, Logan Thome, again, a defensive back. Ja'Kai Jones on the defensive line. Alex Espinoza playing on the line and in that spot. And then Broxton Surratt is on the defensive line as well.
I stand corrected. Actually, technically, Rock Falls was 1-8 last year. They had the forfeit win over Rockford Christian. So they didn't win any games on the field, but technically record-wise, they were 1-8. Tanner, what do you see? I mean, it's a program that struggled, but when you're looking for a spark, what do you see in this, new head coach here at Rock Falls? What do you see that maybe there's opportunities here?
Yeah, like you said, unfortunately, they've kind of had they've struggled a little bit in the past. Haven't had a ton of success, but they do. Fortunate for them, they do return quite a bit on the offensive defensive side. Logan Thome was second team all conference last year, so he'll be kind of an impact player for them this year as well. One thing I like that Coach Shavira said, what's your guys' goal this year? And he listed, to kind of close the gap between us and the other teams in the conference. And I really like that take because I think a lot of times you get these new coaches and stuff, and the take is, well, we're, our goal is to win the conference. We want to be number one and stuff, and kind of just bite off more than you can chew. And I don't know if they're ready to take that leap yet. But obviously the first step to get there is to close that gap between them and the other team. So I think he's kind of got the right approach there. And then with them returning quite a few, so hopefully they'll have a little more success this year.
Yeah. Coach talked about continuing learning how to win through accountability, communication, and just a success mindset. So I think that's the biggest thing for a lot of these high school programs that we cover. And Mitch, you've seen it with other schools around the area. The first thing you got to do is just kind of get it out of your head that when we show up on a Friday night, we're already defeated. This team's already better than us. You know what I mean? I think just you got to get out of that mentality first. So maybe if Coach Shavira could kind of build that in the offseason, man, it just takes a little spark, right, to get kids to buy in. So I'm interested to see here with a handful of experience coming back, Mitch, see what they can do.
Yeah, and we've seen this, right, in our years of this show. We've seen these teams that have had down years, and it's amazing how just little things, if you do the little things right, not just on the field, just as a program, as a part of your culture, it just starts to stack up. And so this is a community in Rock Falls, certainly surrounded by good teams. So it's, a pocket of a good area of football. There's players there. It's just about putting it all together. So we'll see if the Rockets can do it this year.
Yeah, they'll have a tough start to start the season. They start going up against Byron. So the conference champions, someone we'll talk about down the way that a lot of people around the conference picked to win again for good reason. It's a tough start for Rock Falls. But, then down the way, see if they can, slowly build that momentum up. What I like, Coach Shavira talked about at the end of the offseason, they do what's called the Rocket Olympics night. So it's a fun, competitive series of events where kids get to build rapport and kind of work with each other and, compete against each other and the staff. So fun way to kind of build that camaraderie for sure. So all right, let's get into Rockford Lutheran. Don Lee, another new head coach here in the Big Northern Conference. He replaces Jeff Ludke, who had a relative amount of success making the playoffs in his 3 years leading the program. So the Crusaders a year ago were 5-5. They defeated Anawan-Wethersfield in the first round, 42-21, before they lost to a really good Leroy team in the second round. Mitch, this is always one of those Rockford Lutheran teams that we would talk about. We certainly talked about them last year coming in and playing Anawan-Wethersfield. They come from the Big Northern Conference where they're playing 2A, 3A really good programs, and they go into the 1A playoffs. And they found some success last year winning that first round playoff game.
Yeah, I feel like this is a team that we've seen in the playoffs with Lena Winslow. Does that sound familiar? That they've
Might
met in
be.
the playoffs a handful of times.
Yep.
Yeah. So new coach, young team. Gavin Sanders is back as their running back. So again, building off of a 5-5 year where they went to the playoffs, you've got some pieces there, but could be a whole new look here with Coach Lee. But again, that young team just trying to restore that tradition that you mentioned of the Rockford Lutheran football.
Yeah, Tanner, we don't know a lot about this Rockford Lutheran team. They're young, but what do you know about the program, or what do you see coming in here?
Yeah, so Coach Lee, he'll bring some college level coaching experience. He coached at Concordia and Belhaven University, so definitely some good experience there. And they've been successful recently as well. He takes over for Jeff Ludke, who made the playoffs in 3 years of leading the program. And then Mitch mentioned this as well, but Gavin Sanders is going to be huge for them. Probably one of the best running backs in the conference. So they'll look to him to be a huge player, play a huge role in their success. I want to say as a sophomore, he rushed for like 1,033 yards, 19 touchdowns, was the third leading rusher in the conference. And then in 2024, he was voted the Rockford Registrar's preseason player of the year. Missed a little bit of time, I think, last year, so that kind of cut into some of the stats as well, but still had a great year. And I think, he's going to build off that success. He'll be one of probably the best players in the conference. Fun fact about Rockford Lutheran as well. That's where James Robinson, that's where he went to school, played at ISU, undrafted free agent to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and had some successful years in the NFL. So, maybe he'll fill in that role a little bit as well. Obviously, big shoes to fill, but that's kind of who you think of when you think of him.
Yep. I remember seeing James Robinson run the ball as a freshman against Rock Falls, and I had heard the name going into the game because he was, making an impact early on, and then sure enough, the rest of his 4 years in high school and beyond, he certainly made a name for himself. Mitch, what do you got?
I was going to say that this is a program that has been to the playoffs 8 times since 2012. And really, when you look at that stretch between 2012 and 2016, they were playing up. They were playing 4A football, but this is a group that went 9-2, 11-2, 11-1, 11-1, and 8-3. So yeah, the tradition is there. And certainly being in Rockford, but now a little bit of a smaller enrollment, they're going to always have pieces here. So again, new coach, young team, maybe reset just a little bit, but historically, this is a program that has had a lot of success on the field.
Yeah, a young team that's going to have a tough test in week 1. They will be going up against Dixon. So Dixon, a team we already covered that we feel pretty good about, will have a pretty good year. So a tough test there, but see what Rockford Luther can do down the way.
Yeah, that'll be a fun week 1 matchup, kind of get a test to see where both teams are at. I think Rockford Lutheran's another team that you could throw in there that could finish anywhere from that 4-5 to 7-2, range. So we'll kind of get an idea who they are real early on this year.
This episode of View from the West podcast is brought to you by Simulation Sports. In addition to golf simulators and batting cages, Simulation Sports provides golf club repair, custom fittings for driver shafts, and even private lessons for golf, baseball, and softball. Whether you're looking for a fun group activity or want to fine-tune your skills and equipment, Simulation Sports has something for everyone. Visit their facility at 400 South Main Street in Monmouth, Illinois, or go to thesimulationsports.com to start playing today.
At Modern Woodmen of America, service is about more than our members. It's about our community, too. We share values that include personal financial security and helping friends and neighbors in need. We're your partner helping you protect your future, and together we're making an impact here in our local communities. I'm Nate Neighbor. Find me on the Modern Woodmen of America website.
Get to know your local Modern Woodmen representative to plan for your financial future and learn about valuable member benefits. Modern Woodmen of America. Touching lives, securing futures. Securities offered through MWA Financial Services, Inc., a wholly owned subsidiary of Modern Woodmen of America.
The View from the West Player of the Week is brought to you by Breedlove Sporting Goods, Western Illinois' premier sporting goods store for uniforms, apparel, equipment, awards, and online team stores. They offer name brands such as Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike, and are extremely responsive with any inquiries. With a primary focus on the western side of the state of Illinois, Breedlove Sporting Goods is the fastest way to outfit your team. You can check them out on Facebook or at breedlovesports.com. All right, let's talk about Stillman Valley. Head coach Mike Lawler entering his 28th season coaching high school football, 219-83 record, 5 state championships, all at Stillman Valley. this is a program that was named in the, what did you say, Mitch? What was the top 50 or the?
One of the top 50. This is our highest ranking one in the might be our coverage. Genesee would be the highest, but certainly in this conference came in at number 15 on this ranking of top 50 programs. Their record since 1974, 360 wins, 156 losses, 30 playoff appearances as a program. They got 54 wins in those playoff years. And certainly, like you just mentioned, about 5 state championships. They've been to 6. They were runner-up in 2010, but they've won titles in 1999, 2000, 2003, 2009, and 2013.
Yeah, very impressive resume there. It's a team that when we talked about starting coverage of the Big Northern Conference, this was one of the teams that we were looking at, that we were excited about. It's a team that I've, heard for years, growing up watching Illinois high school football, growing up watching games on that Friday and Saturday state championships. You saw Stillman Valley there, right? Like that was a name you were very familiar with. So this is really exciting. Shout out to Coach Lawler. He was the first coach from the Big Northern to respond to our preseason form. So we love that. We absolutely love that. So thank you to Coach Lawler for giving us the info. Mitch, tell us what we need to know here for personnel.
Well, they're going to be an inexperienced group, at least at the varsity level. No returning starters on offense and only 3 on defense. So a lot of new names that we'll see for this group. Brandon Pillman is a quarterback. Brady Stewart will be lining up at fullback. Bryson Vatch at running back, Wyatt Burkett on the offensive line, a couple players on defense, Brody Watterson and Caden Kosh for the Cardinals on defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? This is a team that we have high expectations for year in and year out, but there's a lot of, unknowns here. A lot of guys that got to step in. Tanner, what do you think about this Stillman Valley roster?
Yeah, so kind of like what we talked about with Oregon, how they're going to have a ton returning. Stillman Valley's not going to have hardly anything returning, so it'll be an interesting year for them. But obviously, as Mitch mentioned, as you mentioned, Greg, just a ton of past success. They've had a ton of success, so don't feel like just because they don't have the experience, they're not going to be good. Year in, year out, they're consistently solid. Last year, 5-5. I think they lost to Wilmington in the first round of the playoffs. But I think they're another team too that can, be anywhere from 4-5 to 8-1. They can turn a corner at any point with the coaching history, the tradition history. I think a few years ago they played Byron week 1, and I think a lot of people expected Byron to win that game, and they ended up beating Byron. So they could be a team that could surprise a lot of people for sure.
Yeah, I think when you have the coaching experience like Coach Lawler has, I think that this is a program that's, it's stable, right? I think that regardless of personnel, I think there's just a lot of stability here, and it's, kind of the opposite of some other teams we've talked about where there's a certain confidence that they have just by putting on that uniform. They've learned and they've grown up around it, and they've seen the older kids that have been there before them. I think there's just kind of a quiet confidence that gets built in to a program like Stillman Valley, but it'll be interesting to follow along with because like you said, no returning starters on offense and only 3 on defense. So it's some holes to fill, but that creates a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities here for some kids that we've just mentioned to really make a name for themselves, and we'll be talking about them, week in and week out. They open in a non-conference game against Marengo, so their non-conference game comes in week 1, which is kind of interesting. It gets you a little bit of a tune-up for the Big Rivers competition, or Big Northern competition coming down the way.
Yeah, that'll be a good test for them week 1. I think Marengo was another team that finished 5-5 last year, got into the playoffs, lost the first round. So very similar years. So it'll be a good test for Stillman week 1 to kind of see where they're at and give them an idea who they are.
So we have one fun little note here from Stillman Valley. The team dinner in a machine shed that was converted into a football meeting room at the Cox farm. So they've been doing that for 17 plus years. And coach says that's a big part of their team's success. So we love that. We love the camaraderie. We love all getting together out on the farm. That's great.
Yeah. Team dinners in a converted machine shed.
Yep.
That it's good.
Yeah.
It's top notch dining.
Yep. All right, let's get into Winnebago. The Indians, 2-7 a year ago. Head coach Mark Helm is back. They return 3 on offense, 3 on defense. Mitch, give us some of the names here of who we should be watching for.
Yeah, a couple of impact players here on both sides of the ball. Quarterback Caden Langoff. He'll be throwing to a tight end, big Lincoln Asproof. And then on the offensive line, Brody Oberbrockling. So an all-name team here for the Winnebago Indians.
They are really testing you.
They are testing me super quick. So my apologies to Winnebago if I'm butchering these names. You got Oberbrockling again on the defensive line alongside Ashton Pratt and A.J. Rundblade there in the linebacker slot. So again, this is an all-name group here for Winnebago. So really excited to be rattling off these names week after week.
There you go. Yeah. Coach likes their team speed and their athleticism. Only 2 wins a year ago, but Tanner, what do you see here for a potential turnaround for Winnebago?
Yeah, so kind of like Stillman Valley, yeah, not returning a ton of starters, and they're only going to have a limited number of seniors, so they're going to be a very young team. So it'll be interesting to see how they stack up with the rest of the conference. But one thing about that, with being so young and not having a ton of seniors, if depending on what success or how their season goes this year, it'll be a huge step forward next year, because next year that means they are going to have a lot of seniors and will have a lot of experience. So this year might be more of a building block for them, but we'll see how it goes for them.
10-time playoff appearances under Coach Helm. So this is, again, a program that does have that experience, maybe not in the last couple of seasons, but an experienced head coach. You never count that out here.
Yeah, they've definitely had success in the past as well.
Yeah, I think getting back to, again, it reminds me of what we see in the Northwest Upstate Illini, where depending on, the stretch of time, it's not always the same teams winning. It's Byron right now. It's been Stillman Valley. It's been Winnebago. You go down the list. So I think that, certainly they're a team that has had, success in the past. They open against North Boone. So Tanner, here we go again. This is another game where it just feels really important to start the season with some momentum, getting a win early because the gauntlet's coming down the way.
Yeah, for sure. A test early on for them week 1 with North Boone to kind of get an idea of where they're at. And then obviously after that, they're still going to have to play Byron, Dixon, Oregon, Stillman Valley, all those teams as well. So, we'll kind of see who they are week 1 and then give them an idea as well. If they do sneak away with a win there, who knows where the season could go from there. Like Mitch said, the coach has experience there. They have had success in the past. So it's not like success is unheard of for Winnebago, just kind of had some unfortunate luck the last couple years.
Yeah. When you talk about kind of where they're at, in return wise and the limited amount of seniors, coach is really focused this year going into the season, executing basic fundamentals of the game better than last year, just improving, just getting better day by day and also quickly adapting to varsity speed. There's going to be a lot of players out there that haven't seen a whole lot of varsity action. So I think that, that Mitch is going to be huge. How fast does this Winnebago team adjust to that varsity level?
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, Coach Helm said, let's, one of the keys to success, not making mental errors. Well, that's obviously a lot tougher with a young team and an experienced team. It's obviously, a key to success, but it's a lot easier when you have a veteran team. So it'll be interesting to see how they're able to do there.
Yep. All right. Well, one team left here to cover in the Big Northern Conference. Mitch, when we talk about covering the Big Northern, I think if we're both being honest with each other, this was one of the teams that we were really excited to get into and talk about. The Byron Tigers. We've talked about them in games against Princeton. We've talked about them in games against Dupec. It's exciting that that we're lumping in the Big Northern Conference and getting a caliber team like Byron in here.
Yeah, certainly we're blessed with riches covering a team like Lena Winslow. I don't want to just single out Lena Winslow either, but you're talking about a team that has had more success than most other teams recently. A couple of state championships here in the last couple of seasons, certainly since we started the show. that team in, it was a 23 that just was unbelievably fun to watch. Still have players playing from that team that played on that roster. So yeah, covering this conference and being able to kind of jump into it with a team of Byron's caliber, it's great. It should be a lot of fun to cover this group and see how they can, make up for that playoff loss last year as they come in as probably the top ranked team in 3A, depending on which ranking you look at. So anytime that we could cover a top ranked team, we like that. So this year should be no different with this roster and this coach and this program.
Yeah. Well, before we look ahead, let's look back. Give us the rundown, some of the all-time numbers, Mitch, for the Byron Tigers.
Yes, we talked about it with Stillman, Byron, the other team in this conference that was named as one of IHSA's top 50 programs of all time, coming in at number 31. 347 wins since 1974, 29 playoff appearances, 55 playoff wins. And as mentioned, they've been to the state championship 5 times with 3 titles in 1999, 2021, and 2023.
Yep. Tanner, this is a team that you're very familiar with, obviously following the Big Northern Conference. This is a team that catches everybody's eye, but talk about this program. What do you see year in and year out? What do you like about this program?
Yeah, they're just really good.
Yeah.
They, they're going to be the top pick to, I think, win this conference basically until they're not, type of thing. The conference runs through Byron. Like Mitch said, Stillman kind of was the late 90s, early 2000s, and right now it's Byron. A ton of success in the conference and then a ton of playoff success as well. State championship appearances the last several years, state championship wins the last several years. And just a really good program that's run really well by Coach Boyer. And the thing about Byron too is they don't really try to hide who they are. It's nothing fancy. It's, it's wing tee offense. It's who we are, try to stop us type of thing. And good luck doing that because no one's had a lot of success and they've been very successful at that. And they're like you guys said, from their 2023 state team, playoff loss last year to Montini, but they're still returning a lot of guys as well. So they're gonna looking to have a lot of success this year again as well.
You just said wing T and try to stop us, and Mitch's ears perked up. Did you see that? Yep. Got very excited there. So, and he's a former quarterback, but he appreciates the beauty of what is the power run football. So
yeah,
sure do.
So all right. So last year under head coach Jeff Boyer, the Byron Tigers 10-1. They defeated Prairie Central in the first round 57-20. And then they lost an epic battle to Lombard Montini in the second round, 14-13. I just went back because I wanted to refamiliarize myself and watch the end of this game. And man, it's a gutsy call. And even when you heard from Coach Boyer and the players afterwards, they all agreed, this is what we're doing. We're going to go win this football game. And they fell inches short. They score with 10 seconds left. They go for 2 in the win. Like I said, only to fall inches short. The ball reached the goal line, but the knee was down like a split second before the reach. Man, you rewind back to 2021, Byron in almost an identical spot on the road at IC Catholic, and they score with 5 seconds left. They go for it. They punch in the 2-point conversion on their way to a state title. So, Tanner, we've talked about, this is just a good football team, but this program has the experience, not just experience, but the big time game experience. There is nothing, the lights will never be too bright for these players because they've seen a lot and they've been through a lot.
Yeah, 100%. And when you're the best, you're getting everybody's best, for sure. And they've played, a ton, like you said, 21 against IC there, and then the Montini game last year, even the Dixon. Like, we have 3 games where it's unbelievable that it came down to almost the same way. And then 2 of the 3, they go for 2, and all of them, 2 of the 3, they're able to punch it in. Last year, unfortunately, they're not against Montini. But yeah, just a great program, and yeah, no inexperience there to the big games as well. Every game they plays a big one. It'll be week 2 in Dixon. They're going to play Dupac this year in a non-conference game. Obviously, next year that will be a conference game. But Dupac also a very, very good program. So I'm excited to see that game kind of in the middle of the season to see how those 2 teams stack up as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no secret that Byron is, one of the favorites, if not the favorite in this conference, and for good reason. They returned 5 on offense. They returned 5 on defense. That's some of the bigger numbers we've seen kind of as we've gone through the list in this podcast. Mitch, tell us about the names. They're names that we're very familiar with, and we haven't really been covering them week to week, but we know the names.
Right. Yeah. And two really stand out, and that's going to be Caden Considine and Andrew Talbert. So let's start with Considine. Certainly been a varsity player his entire career. Just doing some quick math, over almost close to 3,000 rushing yards, and just over 40 touchdowns on his career. Only played 4 games last year and still rushed for 573 yards and 6 touchdowns. So just a tremendous player. You go back to that 23 team, 1,600 yards, 27 touchdowns, but was just all over the field in that state championship game. He'll be back. He's healthy. He'll be back. On the quarterback standpoint, that's where Andrew Talbert steps in. Again, on that 2023 team, really stepped up as a freshman and was just a highlight reel as well in that state championship game. He rushed for 466 yards and 10 touchdowns on the season. Last year, threw the ball a little bit, 359 yards, 7 touchdowns, ran a little bit more, 586 yards and 19 touchdowns. So this offense, if you watch a Byron game, you're going to see Considine, you're going to see Talbert, you're going to see a host of players, but you'll recognize these two right away. A couple others, Caden McGough. Caden, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. A fullback, 78 carries last season for 633 yards and 12 touchdowns. You've also got Dawson Criddle, tailback, 280 yards on his own and 2 touchdowns as well. Again, defensively, 5 guys coming back. It's Considine and Talbert once again, big-time players as a linebacker for Considine and a free safety for Talbert. Criddle is a linebacker as well, 25 tackles last year, a fumble recovery, had a pick 6. And Isaac Alvarez on the defensive line, 31 tackles, 4 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, forced fumble recovery, as just another highlight there on the defense. But a lot of players on this Byron team that you could put in this list, and we're just highlighting a couple.
Yeah. Tanner, when you look through the list here, they should be solid on defense. They have a lot of skilled players back. The backfield has a ton of experience, like we talked about, with very talented, athletes out there. The one area to look at is offensive line. They graduated almost everybody from last year. So, take me through maybe that, what you see in there.
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, skill players everywhere, a ton of names that we'll get to know throughout the year, things like that. A lot of returning guys that had impact years in the years prior. But like you said, the offensive line is basically a brand new offensive line. And we've already hit on multiple times in this conference, especially someone who's going to run the wing T, how important it is to be solid up front. So that'll be something that to keep an eye on for Byron. I know, Coach Boyer said that's kind of the area of improvement they're looking at is offensive line. That's where they want to improve at the most, just because they lost so much there. So that'll be the one thing to keep an eye out. And it'll be interesting to see kind of, obviously you have all those skill guys in the backfield. So again, with that, it'll be interesting to see how the skill guys in the backfield complement the offensive line, if they can kind of help each other out to get them up and running.
Yep. Mitch, we're talking about offensive line. We talk about how they enter the field here on home games. It's a favorite.
Yeah, it's a track coach's nightmare, but it's a football fan's dream. If you've never seen it, maybe you have. I think Barstool picked up on it a couple years ago. It's one of the greatest entrances I can think of. North Boone has a good one. At least they did when I was in high school. They have a block of pine trees surrounding their stadium. They kind of come out of it with some smoke. But it doesn't really compare to what Byron does with their offensive linemen. Coming in on a hog trailer, it just rips right up the track in front of the stands, right in front of the field too. And the trailer is just rocking back and forth. Crowds going nuts, and out come the offensive linemen. So just an unbelievable tradition that they've got there. Very, very cool to see.
Yeah. Well, we already talked about, Byron will open, let's see. Byron will open at Rock Falls. And then we've already talked about it. They will play at home against Dixon. Tanner, have you already circled that in your calendar? You're going to be at that one?
Yeah, more than likely. It'll be in Byron this year because it was at Dixon last year. But I'm not far from Byron. Week 2 matchup. Hopefully, another instant classic would be awesome. But that's I think kind of going through it, looking at the conference and stuff. That's everyone's top 2 picks: Dixon, Byron for sure. Just with what they returned, the success that each program's had recently, that type of thing. So I'm excited for that one for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be, it should be great. In week 2, it should really kind of launch us into a great season of Big Northern Conference football there right away. And it'll tell us a lot. I think we'll learn a lot about both those teams and kind of see where they're at, how they stack up. So, overall, Tanner, you kind of mentioned it, that every coach we mentioned, I think almost all of them said Byron was the favorite. So I think there's no secret there with the amount they return, the success they've had. It's their conference, a lot like Lena Winslow. It's their conference until someone knocks them off. So I'm interested to see how they, do in the conference to defend their conference crown. I'm also curious to get that non-conference game against Dupec as a little preview for what Dupec will be coming into the Big Northern the next year. Now, Mitch, we kind of talked a little bit about it, that this may not be the same high-powered Dupec team. There's some question marks coming into this year, but I still think there's talent there, jumping into this conference.
Yeah, and I think, with their last year in the Northwest Upstate Illini, I don't want to say it's a good thing because they're certainly competing with some top talent and competition in that conference. But if you need a year to see where you're at before you head into a new conference, they could be in a good spot there. So, and we'll find out when we get that Byron and Dupec game in the regular season here before it becomes a regular thing. So, looking forward to this conference as a whole. I do think it's Byron's to lose. That week 2 game, I think, as we've already talked about, will be a lot of fun. Should be a great game. But I in the end, I do think it'll be Byron's conference for the 3rd straight year, and see how deep really both teams and other teams in this conference can make in the playoffs.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about it with, Byron, we would agree, is probably the favorite. Dixon is right there. I think we've all agreed that they are right there, ready to fight for that top spot. We've talked about week 2 already. Tanner, let's move into, kind of that 3rd slot maybe, or potentially that 2 slot, depending on who could make a move in this conference. Who else you looking at?
Yeah. And there's just a lot of parity there. I think that could really end up in any order between, those that 3 through kind of 6 spot. I mentioned earlier when we talk about Genoa-Kingston, I like them. Like the numbers they put up defensively last year. They're returning a decent amount on defense. They've had a lot of success in the past as well. So that's a program that's used to success, used to making the playoffs, that type of thing. So they're a team that I like to maybe step up there. And then Oregon is another one just because of the amount they return. 5 guys on offense, 5 guys on defense, basically almost half on each side of the ball. And the last year, I think they were 5-4, finished 5-5 with the playoff loss. So I think they're a program that could build off from last year. They've been successful in the past as well. A lot of playoff experience there and things like that. So Genoa-Kingston, Oregon, Rockford Lutheran with their running back, Sanders, he could be a key player to get them going. They'll be an interesting team to look out for as well. So yeah, kind of maybe any of those teams could fill in that 3 spot, I think.
Mitch, what say you?
I was just saying week 1, Genoa-Kingston and Oregon. That could tell a story, right? 2 teams that were right on the playoff cusp, and we'll get that in week 1 before we get into Byron and Dixon. But yeah, I agree. Both those teams certainly, again, you have playoff teams coming back. They have the makeup to do it once again. I'll say I think Stillman Valley will have a better year than 5-5. They've got a lot of experience to make up for, but it's just too good of a program to be at that 500 level. So, but really looking forward to that week 1 between Oregon and Genoa-Kingston.
Yeah, to me, I'm looking at this first week matchup to start the season with Winnebago and North Boone. I think that both of those teams, Winnebago was down last year. So you start looking at, we talked about North Boone's schedule to start the year, that there's some potential there. But with what Winnebago has coming back, if they're ready to roll in week 1, maybe they come away with that win and then they're off and rolling. So I think those are two teams that, again, it's just going to be a log jam in the middle, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth and shuffling throughout the year. And I think that's what makes this conference fun, is that parity, like you said at the beginning of the show, Tanner.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a ton of parity. You kind of never know. But like you mentioned, I think we're going to get a really good idea early on this year, which will be awesome. We have a lot of good week 1 matchups to kind of see where teams stand. So we'll get a good idea real quickly this year.
Yep. Tanner, one last question before we let you go. Did you have success? Did you beat Morrison when you were in high school?
We did not.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So my
that
senior,
would have been around their first state championship.
It would have been in their heyday, probably.
So yeah, it was their, they were really, really good. I want to say, my junior year, we lost to them. And then Newman won state that year, I want to say. But Morrison was right there as well. And then my senior year, we lost to Morrison. We actually gave him a pretty good fight, I think I remember. We lost 10-0, so it was a pretty good game. It was one of our better games that we actually played, but ended up on the losing end. And then that year, Morrison won state, and Morrison and Newman, either of those teams could have won state as well.
Well,
in 2008, were you a junior?
2008, I would have been. No, I would have been like a freshman then.
Okay, that was a 41-40 Morrison win.
Wow. Yeah. Now, I was trying to give you bragging rights there, Tanner, but you fell in the wrong time to be playing Morrison,
Yeah, they had some pretty good teams my junior and senior year.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mitch, did you defeat Amboy? Do you remember in your heyday?
Amboy was really good. We lost to them pretty badly our junior year. It was like 34-0 or something. That was our homecoming game. And then we would have won our senior year. So, but they were great.
Yep.
That was a stretch of Amboy football that was really, really good.
Man, you both caught the other one's team at the wrong time then, apparently. So neither one really has bragging rights here. So I tried, but no, Tanner, thank you so much for jumping in here. Our big Northern Conference insider. I really appreciate getting your knowledge and getting your takes on some of these schools and what to look forward to. We'll pick your brain throughout the year. And, hopefully if you want to help us compile some stats along the way, we would certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely here to help for whatever you guys need. I'm excited to be here, excited for this. It's an awesome conference to follow. So glad you guys are covering it and we're doing this.
Yeah. So Mitch, maybe we'll have to have Tanner on some Friday nights for the Instant Reacts podcast. So Tanner, the goal is to go live at about 10:15, 10:30 on Friday nights and just let it roll. Just talk about what we just saw that night. So especially early in the season, if you catch that Byron Dixon game, maybe we'll have to pick your brain, get you on the call.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Mitch, anything else? This is the inaugural Big Northern Conference preview in the books.
Yeah, that's a wrap for this one. Only got one more conference to cover, and then we'll probably do a week 1 preview show, and then we're talking recaps from there on out. So pretty wild that we'll be talking week 1 football here in just a matter of weeks.
That's right. You nailed it. August 19th next week, we'll be talking Western Big 6 football with Denny Diericks. And then we'll get into the big show Sunday, August 17th at the Other Bar, 5 p.m., downtown Moline. That's our View from the West kickoff party. Make sure you tune in, listen, watch both of those. Go back, listen to any previews if you haven't caught them yet, and then we'll be talking week 1. It's here. The season is upon us. It could not be more exciting. So thank you, Tanner. Thank you, Mitch, of course, for being here. And thank you to everyone who listens, to everyone who follows along. We'll be seeing you. We'll be talking to you a lot coming up in the next couple weeks. That'll do it for this week's episode of View from the West. Thank you so much for listening. I encourage you to go out to Apple Podcasts or Podbean and subscribe so you can follow along, and downloads will come automatically every week. You can follow along on Twitter at ViewFromWestPod. You can also email me if you're interested in being a sponsor, viewfromwestpod@gmail.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.